Hey everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. We're going to get into a Homelite 330 here. This saw was one that I got on some trading, and just taking a quick peek at it, there is 10 shades of goofy stuff, almost said the other word, going on with this saw. It's been, well, I don't know what it's been. Let's take a look at it. Okay, we're going to work off of the vise today, or mount, whatever you want to call it, because I still have that 460 exploded back here. Until that clutch removal tool comes in, it sits on my bench, taking up space. Now, so this thing, the quick look over, sprocket's not bad, muffler looks complete. It's missing its handguard, that's been actually broken off. And, of course, it's part of the mounting here, so those little broken chunks right there are left behind. This doesn't have proper fuel cap on it. I don't know what this is from. I mean, I guess it worked. I mean, it does have a duckbill in it. Gas and oil. Yeah, I have no earthly clue what that's from. If we get this, if we decide to make this a runner, obviously that's going to get replaced. So let's just get some vitals on this thing. Let's find out if she's got spark. And this may be one. No, I can get the ratchet in there. It's tight, but I can do it. Ah, there we go. Let's see what she's got. And then we'll do a compression test. There's not too many folks that are still considering the 3.6, or that are considering a 330 to be a collector's saw. It's got to be a pretty clean example, and this, while it's not horrendous, is not what I would call pretty clean. Okay. It's there. Huh. I don't know what this rope is, or if there's something wrong with the pulley. Okay, she's got spark. Let's see if we can get this thing to recoil properly enough times to do a quick compression test. So I don't want to waste my time on something, well, it isn't worth wasting my time on. And this is a little bit of an odd angle, so I want to make sure this adapter hose threads in without cross-threading. There we go. Let's see what we can get to. Yeah, 55 on one pull. Second one got us up to 80. There's 95. This recoil's pissing me off. 108. 115. 120. There's 125 cold. These were not a high compression saw. So, I'm going to say that in all likelihood the engine on this is fine. Probably representative of a saw that is, that is insane to say, but 45 years old. That one, the serial tag is showing 1980. So, where do we go from here? Well, any 330 that you've not got good history on, you need to see what's going on with the intake boot. That's just an absolute given in these things. And you do have to take a fair amount of the saw apart to get to the intake boot. I'm certain that we have done this on the channel before, but new videos always gather more views and attention than old videos. That is just the way YouTube works. So, for the new guys, this is a disaster. God, this is a disaster under the hood. Why do I say that? Okay. I think I hear a little rain coming in. Let me find a 3/4 inch wrench, and I will tilt this down a little bit so that you guys can see why I am unimpressed thus far with what I'm finding. Oh, ouch. Really prefer not to spill parts everywhere. Alright, that should give you a better angle. And I will try to do this without making it. Alright. Oil. Loose, wet oil slick in there. I can't for the life of me understand why there is silicone over a spot in the hose unless the hose has a nick in it, and that was the solution. The oil hose has been replaced with a chunk of Oregon hose, which, okay, that's fine, but it's not big enough to actually seal in here properly. So I think that's why there's an oil slick in here. Anytime the saw was tilted forward, I'm pretty sure it was leaking around here and just contaminating everything in there. Yeah, it's not... It's more of an annoyance if you're like me and you prefer a saw that is not a disaster. I suppose when I had this cap off earlier, I should have done the sniff test. It does not smell rotten. But the way this all looks, I don't think I would want to just put fuel in it and attempt to start it. That does not quite jive with what I want to do here. Alright, we're going to take... I'm virtually certain we're going to have to replace the intake boot. But we're going to take the carburetor off right now and just see what... That was so loose. God. See what we can see. This hose doesn't... God, that doesn't make any sense. There's no other reason I can think of for silicone to be all around that. I'm going to push the impulse hose off. And we'll just lift this out. Okay. Zama C1S H3. That'll be a new carb video. Alright. Now I have said before, sometimes you can see what's going on down in here and sometimes you can't. And this is one that I'm going to say I can't. So, with as widely, well, that is, I cannot tell. That rubber doesn't rebound quite as quickly as I'd like to see. Alright, here's a new boot. You know, that rebounds quickly. This one I don't know about. And the amount of time it would take to try and set up a pressure test on this, we could probably just take it apart and inspect for ourselves. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start with getting the handle out of the way. Again, with how much hardware is loose on this saw, I kind of want to go through just about everything, because I don't know where the last person that worked on it left off. This handle is simple. 2 Allen head screws. Piece of cake. So I'll start a pile of parts over there. This air filter, God, has seen better days. And that is just, yeah, that's not great. I'm assuming the camera has focused by now, I hope. Yeah, this whole thing is kind of an oil slick. Alright, so to get these apart, you've got to get it apart. And I'm not being a smart aleck about that. It's going to be a full disassembly. So I'm going to leave it at that angle long enough to get the starter off of here, because it bolts to the upper and lower housings, and that's what we're going to end up taking off before it's all said and done. I'm just going to assume that rope is swollen with oil, and we'll probably go ahead and replace it. Okie dokie. So, your engine housing, you've got 3 AV mounts on this. One right here, one right here, and one right there. This one, you've got to pull the screw out before you can get your bottom engine housing off, and then you've got to pull this bottom strap out. There's a screw missing right there. That's part of why we're doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this one while it's at an angle advantageous to me. I can speak, honestly. And then we'll turn this thing all the way over. So that you guys can actually see what the hell I'm doing. So that screw, now you can see we've already loosened things up quite significantly there. Let's go ahead and get this bottom strap. Again, that's where there's one missing. So I will have to dig through the old parts bin and find one of those. And then there are 4 screws on this lower engine housing, and it should come right off. These are long. See how loose these are? And the hammers aren't doing anything in that drill, or impact driver. And look how soaked with oil it is. I'm guessing this is going to be a disaster in here. In fact, I'm going to fire up the heater on this damn ultrasonic cleaner right now. It's a cool day, so it'll take a while to get there. Okay. Wow. I'm actually not convinced that the oil tank itself isn't leaking. And if it is, that may be the death knell for this chainsaw. So I don't think I have one. And the last time I looked for one on eBay, that was an item that was difficult to locate. So we'll see. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and flip this thing over now. Back over. And the way to get this apart is not glamorous. So we need to get the oil pump out of the way. That way you guys can see a little bit better. And it's these 2 mounting screws, not this one back there. That holds the cover on. If you take that out, you're just going to unnecessarily explode this and put oil everywhere. Okay. And now this is going to want to sit here And assuming there's oil in the oil tank, it's going to want to leak all over the place while you're trying to work. And I should have checked that. Yeah, it's got oil. Alright. So we're going to unplug this. And let the pig mat do its work. And what do I have laying around that's the right size to plug that? Nope. How about an Allen wrench from a furniture assembly kit? There we go. Yeah. It's not sophisticated, but that'll work for now. So then the carburetor chamber plate is retained by these two screws right here. Go ahead and pull those out. Now it's starting to get a little loosey-goosey. That boot may be okay, but again, as messy as this saw is, and the question about that tank, we got to do this. So now you want to take your remaining two AV mounts off. This one has the cup washers on it. So capture those. And then the insert actually came out on the screw there. That's actually separate. The two that are internal do not have those cup washers on them because there'd be no way for you to get them in place. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this back one off. And you've got to take your fuel cap off because you've actually got to get the tank, or the throttle handle and oil tank assembly off of the fuel tank in order to get it out. And this, one thing we should remember to do that I typically forget until it's dangling there is you've got your kill switch leads back here. You know, if you were not. There we go. Right there. See, that one's already loose, which is interesting. Maybe I knocked it loose, maybe I didn't. Just leave those hanging at that point. Okay, now if you haven't had yours apart in a long time, it's going to be tight. This one is already loose up to a point. So you've got to get the back of it up above the AV mount, and then you're basically trying to tilt it forward and get it to come loose from the tank. And it's not always easy. I thought this one would be. There it goes. Now that doesn't normally happen. Normally the tank stays with the saw. So, yeah, she's a mess. So that's interesting. Now, that's the fuel tank, but that looks like oil. So is this just... What the hell do we have going on here? Is that just oil that ran from the top down, or do we have a leak? What do we have? Alright, I'm going to get this clear. No. I'm so glad we did this. Let's keep going with disassembly. We'll check on the tank in a little bit. We'll set it aside. That has got to be cleaned before we can even test it. I'm telling you, any of these things that have sat around, just get a car boot and plan on it, okay? Just do it. So you see what I'm doing there? That should not be happening. So technically what should be happening, if this was a good boot, what you would do to get this chamber plate off is just push it down off of its ridge that it seals on, through. That's so effed. And then you pull this plate up, and you can take this hose out. This is the carburetor pulse hose. And there's a connection on the bottom coming out of the crankcase right there. That's your oil pulse line. So that comes off. It's got to be cleaned up. Damn it. Can't even see anything. And then your discharge hose. You kidding me? I've never had one of those come off. I'm going to put that back on for the moment. It all makes sense when you go to put it back together. So oil pulse line is the short one, carburetor pulse is the long one coming right out of there, oil discharge is that one. Where'd our intake boot go? What happened to it? Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. And seeing as how that's the retainer plate down there, yeah, she'd be bad, no good. That's what happens to them. So I may have done some of this damage taking it apart, but with it installed, just running my finger in there, you couldn't tell. Could you with a little scope and camera? Maybe. And if a boot is right on the edge and it tears just because you tore the whole saw apart, that needed replaced anyway. So for cleanup purposes, I'm going to leave this in place. I want to leave that in place because I want to clean all of this. And because we want to clean the saw correctly, we want to go just a little bit further than this and get this fan housing off. Not hard. I want to say it's 5 screws. We'll do the ones that we can see right now. And we'll turn it. And there are the 2 right there on the bottom. Note that one is the ground lead. And note the rough position of it. These were known for getting installed wrong or over time working their way over, melting against the muffler, which would then cause the kill switch not to work because of the AV system. That should not have been that loose either. This saw, I don't know how it rattle banged the, well, everything loose, honestly. There we go. Generally, it's not super greasy inside of here, but we're here. I want to clean it up as best I can. And that, unfortunately, is how far you got to go to get to a coil if one of these goes bad. And they do. Not with a huge regularity, but they can. Alright, I'm going to quit for a bit, clean all this stuff up off of camera, and then we will come back and see about putting it back together. Alright, let's get back to it. I think I've gathered all the parts and pieces that we need. I think I've cleaned as good as I'm going to clean. So, having compression and spark were a couple of the qualifications for this thing to get repaired. No major missing parts were another qualification for it to get repaired. And the final qualification was that fuel tank not be bad. I haven't found a handguard yet, but that is probably the least of my worries. So what we're going to do is we're going to pressure test this fuel tank. And I actually have on hand a faded but proper used fuel cap. So we're going to use that. Gasket looks pretty good. So all things being equal, if there's no problems with this tank, I ought to be able to slip this little hose inside of the big hose of my pressure tester for the carburetor, and I ought to be able to pump this up. Okay, that gauge is all goofy looking, but that's 6 psi. No, it isn't. I can't even read my own gauge. That's about 4.5. This tank actually doesn't leak. In spite of some of the little dents and bangs I see at the bottom here. And I don't know, again, I don't know if the silicone, I don't know why it's there. It's not leaking. But we're going to replace that hose anyway. But that's a quick way to check your fuel cap and your tank for leaks if you have a plastic tank like that. Now, if you were getting a bleed down, take your soapy water and start spraying it around penetrations. When you find the bubbles, you find your leak. So I'm happy. This means we've got a project here. A project that isn't a tear it down and scrap it for parts. So we'll start by getting the intake boot taken care of. And I'm going to slide this back. Obviously, I've taken the old assembly off because I wanted to dry out any water that might have gotten in the engine while I was cleaning. And this only goes in one way. Okay, I'll show you guys that in a second. Yeah, you guys can see that. What I'm going to try to do is center this up well enough that when I'm doing the editing, I can do some zoom digitally instead of playing with the control up there. Anyhow, you pull your two little screws out, which were probably those ones. Boink. You got a reed block. Now, don't take this apart if you don't have to. Just look at it. There's no chipped reeds. Sheet of paper or less. Gap right there. Call it good. Excuse me. Now, I've noted this before. In the bottom of the intake housing, whatever you want to call this, there's a hole drilled right there. And that I will attempt to zoom in on, because this is important. And it's supposed to be there. I'll see if I can find the memo that talks about it. Bear with me. You see the light? Maybe you don't. Well, I don't know how that's going to look, but right down in this corner, right there, there is a hole drilled from the factory to prevent fuel puddling. So the explanation that I read was that it was there so that if the saw was allowed to idle for an extended period of time with the nose of the bar tipped downward, fuel could puddle, and then when you went to pick it up, it would die. I think we've all experienced that when a saw is not tuned quite right. But they literally created an air leak right there. Okay, I've plugged a few of these with JB Weld. I don't get a difference that I can see that's worthwhile. Okay, the carburetor is set up to work with this. I guess it is what it is. I just leave it alone now. But it's there. Don't assume that there's something bad going on. All right, we got to get what's left of the old boot out of here. And there's some of the old boot left in here. Now this one's not as gooey as a lot. A lot of them you'd be scraping either hardened goo or wet goo that just makes a giant mess out of everything. But you do want to take a minute and get the old goo out so that it does not start reacting with the new rubber and causing any issues. Okay, I've got a lot of parts out here, more than I care to. But my bench is a mess right now because of that 460. Alright, so there's a cutout in the reed block That's going to face back here. There's only one way this can go. If it fights you at all, turn it around. Drop your plate in. And 2 little screws will hold that in place. We're going to get this just taken care of. It'll bottom out on its own. You're done. So let's go ahead and put the air shroud on. I want to be very intentional about how we reassemble this and make sure that we're not creating problems for ourselves. And this air shroud was one of the last things we pulled off. Now, this, I'll show you in a minute, this isolator is actually missing a couple components, and we're going to add those in. Just get to, whoop, hey now. Spark plug wire goes in that lower slot, and then the rest of the cutout is for the plug itself. Generally, alignment is not a huge fight on these, but I do like to leave them loose until I've got everything started. Make sure that's not pinched in there. It's supposed to move around a bit. First mistake. We've got a kill switch lead, grounding lead that needs to go right there. But it's better to realize it right here and now than when you get the saw back together and you go, whoops, that doesn't work. There we go. Much better. That should keep those leads as far away from the muffler as possible. Okay. So every isolator on this saw is going to have an insert like that. Okay, it's just a steel insert that the screw rides in. It also provides some structure to this. And then on the outside there are supposed to be these steel rings. They provide some more structure to it. They're in place here and on the lower one, but I noticed they were missing on this one. So we're going to go ahead and add those. And they're actually easier to add without the steel insert in there. Come on, baby. There we go. These isolators are not growing on trees, so why do something to prematurely age one? Keep all the right parts in. Those little steel rings, I've got oodles of stock on those, and I'm sure other folks do too. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's slip this back in before I forget. There we go. Now we're loaded up and ready to roll. Let's do a hose kit. And I'm actually using hose kits, or what I would sell you guys from my chart. I love to do that every once in a while just to double check, especially on the complex ones, that I haven't made a mistake somewhere. Can you guys... yeah, you guys can basically see what I'm up to here. So I'm replacing the bigger hose. That's the oil pressure or pulse, whatever you want to call it, hose that's going to that carburetor chamber plate. Okay. And now I'm going to replace the carburetor pulse hose itself. Again, these may or may not be bad. Thing is, I don't care. I'm in here. I'm not going with the false economy this time around. I don't want to take this apart again. Alright, our oil discharge. Looks like I give plenty of extra on that. Or maybe I cut this line just a smidge long. I always angle cut, but not always do you need it. And this is one of those cases that you don't necessarily need it. And to think about this, how this hooks up. It's been a hot minute since I've worked on a 330. Okay, we've got some good stuff going there. Our chamber plate, fresh out of the ultrasonic cleaner, and then a nice little rinse. And take the oil or the water out of here because the gasketed area for the oil pump doesn't need any moisture. That we don't want. That's the oil feed line. That's a fuel hose. Yes, we are ready to hook this up. Alright. So again, there's the two connections under here. So the discharge, the small barb is a discharge to the bar pad. That's your outlet from the oil pump. So that's going to get that. Okay. This big one is your pressure line, pressure, pulse, whatever, from the cylinder over to the oil pump. It's also the shortest, so we're going to hook it up last. And it goes over that way, like that. We're going to put the carburetor pulse line through this grommet. And I always do a thicker wall on the carburetor pulse line just so that there's never any collapsing, any bull. That's just what I do. So we'll go ahead and hook this up. It's a little bit of a angle there, but it works. And now we're ready to get our boot fed through. And that is basically just manhandling it as carefully as one can manhandle something. If you have a lot of trouble, it's a real cold day, you can put this thing in some warm water and soften up the rubber a little bit. There we go. We're almost there. One more good. Come on! There she goes. And then it'll snap right into place. And then you take a peek under there and just make sure that you don't have any silliness. Any kinks. That all looks beautiful. I probably pulled that a little too far. There she is. Alright, so we know that our fuel tank is good, but we need to replace that hose. And I'm not convinced. Oh! Did y'all see that? This thing was rotten in the tank. Hadn't broken, or maybe it had. The seal around here was good when I did the pressure test, but that's no good. Yeah. Ah. Okay. So there were some remnants of the old hose in there. Alright, I don't want to... Oh, that filter. That filter. Just got a little bit of remnant of the old hose on it. That is actually going to be fine. I'm not replacing that. So, get your new hose started. Let's throw a filter on. I like the weight of that filter. It's going to keep that thing down quite nicely. But I do want a little lube to help it slide into place. Come on. I'm going to do one of those. Oop, hey, no, bad. Stay. Good enough. Okay. Take a wild guess that that's the right amount. Alright, like I say, normally when the throttle handle comes off, that does stay in place. At least in my experience, it does. Let's try putting it back on. We've got... yeah. We should be good to go. We'll replace that oil hose first. See if she wants to puke all over the bench. Like I think she probably does. Homelite used several different specs for the length of hose in here. I go with the... yeah, see, that's just too much. That's what the manual, the earliest manual called for, was nearly 11 inches, I think. And subsequently they shortened it to around 7 inches because you end up with that weird-ass curlicue, and half the time the filter would be banging down here, and when you're cutting tilted forward, it's going to run dry long before the tank really does. Alright, this one I'm going to need to pull through. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, and I'm going to try to be clever, and as I pull this old hose, let's see, where am I doing it from? I guess from here. As I pull the old hose out, I'm going to try and pull the wire into place for me. And it probably won't work. But I'm going to try it anyhow. Especially won't work if I have a weird twist in it like that. Come on. Is this really necessary? Don't piss me off. God. Well, that was cute. Would have worked great if I hadn't pulled so damn hard that it pulled my wire all the way through the tank. There we go. Suppose that might be easier. I say, Homelite really shortened this hose by a good 4 to 5 inches. And I'm going to run with that spec, which puts that finder right about there, maybe a little less. That's probably about right. So for now, I'm going to put that oil cap back on to prevent as big a mess as I could make. And rely on it being a cool enough day that it doesn't pressurize the tank at all before I get everything installed and cause a big mess. Come on, you. Okay. You go back over there, out of my way. That's the hole in the grommet that I was talking about. And we'll fish that into place. I may have more exposed there than I need, but I'll grab that fuel filter later and pull it back in if I need to. Now we're ready to put this in place. So you start it over the fuel neck of the tank there. Get all your hoses in place. Now see how the fuel hose is up through here. That's definitely the way it's got to be. Are we really going to make it that easy? Okay, so I can see that my grommet does not want to drop into place here. So I am reaching up with my hand, trying to get it to snap in. Oh, come on. And I'll use a screwdriver if I have to. Oh, there she goes. You'll see it line up. So, for safety's sake, I'd like to start that right now. And the only safety concern is my sanity, to be perfectly honest. And yours if you're doing this job. Okay. So remember, this one has these external cup washers. Get it in. There she goes. Okay, that's about right. It may look too loose, but once everything's tied together, that is not far off. I know some guys will replace the isolators and go, it didn't make any difference. Nope. Unless they're actually torn or rotten, it doesn't make much difference. Alright, line up. These are small screws. Don't go crazy on them. Okay. Need to get our chamber plate gasket back in here. And that probably would have been easier before I screwed that in place. But as you can see, it can be done. And really, this isn't gasketing much of anything other than the base of the carburetor as the boot compresses. It's really about it. Our oil pump gasket has got to slip back in there. And it may be time for that. In fact, excuse me, it is time for that. Now, I didn't drain this. I'm going to gamble that we're going to get her to prime. I've got some older videos show the fight. Some of these pump oil right away, and some are a miserable pain in the arse. Okay, so I actually need a little more out of the tank to make this connection down here and not have it kink. Yeah, I might have to split the difference on some of the sizing of this hose. See, this is part of why I like to use them. Yeah, already got oil in it. No kinking there. Alright, let's leave that alone up here for the moment. So I'm not convinced I have a carburetor kit on hand, which could make this come to an abrupt stop. Before we get too much further along, I want to show you something that I found while I was cleaning, and that's 2 holes in the muffler. This apparently was sold as a Western model. That is a cut-off wire guard, and the 2 other attachment points over here are ripped off, which means there's a hole, 2 holes in the muffler. Oops. Those weren't very tight either. Okay, rest of the muffler's good. 2 holes right there. I don't want that, so it goes in there. I'm going to put, I don't have one of those wire Western guards on hand. And we're just going to go back with the Stalker. So this muffler, yeah, rings look good. These are the thicker rings. Minor carbon scoring on that piston. Not bad, but somebody ran it rich. These do not use a gasket. And they've got a lot of baffling in them to try and control noise. A lot of people would gut them out. I'm not going to, especially not with the spark arrestor. There we go. Those are actually tight. What a concept. And we won't be leaking exhaust and burning the back of our drive case cover. Okay, so we've got our switch wires to hook up here. Oopsie, oopsie doopsie. And I actually don't remember which one is supposed to go where. In the end, you're achieving the same thing. But I'm going to do it so that the routing keeps them as far from that muffler as possible. And I certainly didn't knock that one off with how hard that went on. Hey now, let's not be a rude SOB, just slip on. That one I could have knocked off. That went on a little easier. Alright. So, we can drop our bottom cover in place. Which again is about as simple as feeding the spark plug wire through. And voila. Now with these long screws, you've actually got to guide them to where they're going, or they'll fall off to the side and do you no good. And of course they're going to the corners, not angled in or like that. So I always try to drop them down with them angled to the corner just a tiny bit, so that they basically drop into place where I want them. Let's see if we got them. Yes. Yes. Oh yeah. Love it. I love it when a plan comes together. Okay. Okay. We need to install our isolator screw, which again is buried under the handle here. Do I want to... I'm going to leave the handle off for now. Got just cleaning made that thing better. Ha, that's all it needed was clean. Alright, let's deal with the carburetor. Carburetor ended up being a complete disaster inside. Improper parts, missing parts. This main video is getting long enough and I wanted to do the carb on its own anyway, so when I get the carb kit in, I'll put a link in this video so that you guys can see what's going to happen with it. But in the meantime, I'm going to try using a spare carb that I have off the shelf. And that's essentially what I'm attempting to do here. What in the hell is wrong with this thing? Is this even... I'm not even sure this is the right diaphragm on here. That's had the end cut off of it. Okay. See what I mean? This carburetor's been bastardized completely. I've got to look and see at an IPL and see what we're dealing with here. So we'll assemble everything else that we can possibly assemble. Which isn't much, but enough to get it the hell off my bench. Okay, let's get the starter in place. I'm serious, just cleaning it. That's all it needed. Get the grease and goblins out of it. So, we'll run with it. What the hell? I would have liked to have finished this today. Just on principle. But such is life. Okay. I did pull a used air filter out of my stash. And no, I don't have a big stash of these, but I happen to have one on hand. So we're going to run with it. It's a hell of a lot better shape than that other old thing. This one's not broken, saturated, and rotten. So that one's going where it belongs, in the old trash can. Alright. We're about done. I hate to say it, but we are about done. Okay, that mess of a carburetor can wait for another day when I get a rebuild kit. I remembered I have a spare carb. So let's use that. I really want to see if we got all the gremlins out of this saw. And I'm betting we did. So when you've had the grommet off like that, you've got to kind of realign everything in here by looking straight down through the bolt holes. There we go. Okay. And that'll close. Perfect. go ahead and get our fuel and oil or impulse lines attached. And I can never remember which one is first. Give you guys the best view that I can. Okay. So impulse is the thicker one that goes right there. It looks like that will probably go on first. And it'll be the easier of the two, because that thicker wall hose is just more forgiving. This thin wall hose, it is the fuel line. There it goes. It is the right size for this, so that helps. You just kind of got to work it down without pinching and causing damage to it. There we go. No kinks. That looks pretty good to me. And you might think, why don't you leave that camera there all the time? Because it's right in my way. That's why. And because every time I move it, something like that happens and something hits the floor. Okay, so let's go ahead and tighten this down. That's it. Now, if your choke plate doesn't move freely at this point, you have a problem. That one moves freely. So now when you go to set the cover on, you want to match your choke position to your button to the actual choke position. We have full choke, so I'm going to try setting that down the right way. And that should drop right in. And now if I open the choke and pull this off, look at that. Choke is open. Very important that you get that aligned. Otherwise, any test runs you try to do are destined for failure. Obviously, I don't have a replacement front handguard yet, so we'll have to run with the cover and these two broken tabs. It is what it is. Okay. A little bit of fuel. We are ready to see if the work we did is going to be sufficient. And I really... Now that is not the most encouraging thing to start out with. That's what I thought. Come on, baby. All right. Perhaps there is something in that carb other than gas. Low speed side is not acting correct. Thought we had it there. Not going to do this too many more times though. think there's enough in there. I think I've got a muffler wire, or a wire near the muffler. This is going to be hot. So that... yeah, I think I might have actually reversed these. And I think I've got it rubbing. Oh yeah, right there. Dummy. Dummy, dummy, dummy. Alright. See if I can turn it on its side with it running now without it dying. I'll bet I can. Hey now. Huh. Well, I don't know where the lead is. It's giving me trouble, but that's a little concerning. A little concerning indeed. Every single time. Well, that's disappointing because that means I'm going to have to go back in there and find whatever the hell the problem is. And that is disappointing. I am not at all happy about that. Alright, camera, focus. Right there. See that? That was an idle screw that was driven all the way down, blew out the casting of the carb. So unless I can find one of those covers, this carb is going to be junk. I can still do a rebuild video for you guys. But without that cover being right, that's never going to run again. So that cover was on this carb, and that's why it was losing its fuel prime, because that is your main fuel pump right there. So it was just ever so slightly lifting that gasket, and it had actually already started to deteriorate it. So crazy stuff happens. Now, where this wire is that's giving me issues, that I'd love to know. I mean, that's got insulation all over it, so I couldn't begin to tell you where in the world it's actually hitting the engine housing, but I don't believe that this is a crankshaft seal. That just sounds like an engine that's turning off with a switch. So, if I can find it, I'll let you guys know. Okay. Can't say that I definitively found anything, but obviously I did. I just don't know what. I couldn't find a spot on the the wire from the coil to the switch that looked obviously bad, but I went ahead and wrapped it in decent electrical tape all the way around, and then tied that lead to the spark plug wire, the main coil or spark plug lead itself. They're all kind of a bundle now. Nowhere to rattle to. There it is. She's running right. I can turn it on its side and it doesn't kill right away. That was 100% ignition. Loss of ignition. That's what we were hearing there. So, funny stuff. Didn't expect this project to take as long as it did or get as involved as it was, but that's the way some of these go. So I apologize for the length of the video. It's a little longer than what I wanted it to be, but that's reality. And what you're going to see is probably about half the time that I spent, once I had to tear it down again. And then tear it down again. Because the first time I tore it down and wrapped those wires, I didn't realize that I had accidentally pulled the oil pulse hose loose. Got it all assembled, fired it up, and it sounded like, well, a blown intake boot. I had to tear it all down again. Crap happens. Hope some of this video is helpful for you guys. Tried to get some decent close-up shots. See how that goes. Again, I hope it's helpful. We'll catch you on the next one.